A man with a shattered body stood in a crowded Roman street, owned by someone else, with almost nothing under his control. And yet centuries later, emperors, generals, and exhausted modern people would turn to him for the same reason. He seemed to know a secret about freedom that comfort, status, and power still cannot buy. How does a slave become the teacher of kings? Because Epictetus understood something most people still miss. Your suffering is being trained somewhere, whether you choose the program or not. But first, let me tell you why this matters more today than ever. Rome was the center of the world. Marble temples, military parades, senators in polished halls pretending they controlled history. But some of the most powerful ideas in all of Stoic philosophy did not come from a throne, or a senate, or even a library. They came from a man born into slavery. Epictetus owned nothing, not his time, not his body, not even at first his own name in the way we think of identity now. Tradition tells us he was physically disabled, likely after abuse, and somehow, instead of becoming consumed by bitterness, he became one of the clearest minds in all of philosophy. That alone should stop you. Because we live in an age obsessed with optimization, morning routines, cold plunges, supplements, productivity apps, and yet many people with every convenience are mentally weaker than a man who had none of them. And here's where most people get Epictetus wrong. They think Stoicism is about suppressing emotion, becoming robotic, lowering expectations until nothing can hurt you. It's not. That version of modern Stoicism is just emotional fear dressed up as discipline. Epictetus was teaching something much more demanding, a complete training program for being human, not one idea, not one quote. 3 disciplines, 3 arenas where your life is won or lost. The discipline of desire, the discipline of action, the discipline of assent. What you want, what you do, what you believe, miss any one of them and the others collapse. Master them, and you become strangely hard to disturb. Marcus Aurelius would later echo this structure in his own inner battles. Seneca wrestled with it in politics, wealth, and mortality. But Epictetus taught it with the sharpness of someone who had been stripped down to essentials. And what he taught next changed everything. Freedom is not a political condition first. It is a psychological one. Epictetus begins where almost all suffering begins, desire. Not because desire is always bad, but because undisciplined desire turns your peace into a hostage situation. He puts it with brutal clarity: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. That sounds almost too simple. So simple, in fact, that people dismiss it. But think about what he's actually saying. Most human misery is not caused by events themselves. It is caused by demanding that reality obey your preferences. You want people to understand you. They don't. You want your work rewarded. It isn't. You want your body to stay young, your plans to stay intact, your relationships to stay safe, your future to stay predictable. And reality, with total indifference, says no. Now here's the counterintuitive claim: anxiety is often a form of arrogance. That will irritate some people, and good. Because when you're chronically anxious, what are you really saying? You're saying reality must give me certainty before I can be at peace. The universe must explain itself to me. Other people must behave according to my emotional timetable. Epictetus rejects that completely. In Stoic philosophy, peace does not come from controlling outcomes. It comes from narrowing your concern to what is actually yours. And what is yours? Your judgments, your choices, your aims, your effort. What is not yours? Reputation, whether markets, other people's loyalty, timing, aging, death. This is not passivity. It is the beginning of power. Because every time you emotionally attach yourself to what you cannot command, you volunteer for instability. And every time you return attention to what is in your power, you build inner independence. You can test this right now. Think of the thing that has been draining you most lately. Is the pain coming from action you need to take, or from your insistence that reality should already be different? That question is uncomfortable because it exposes something ancient wisdom always exposes. Much of our suffering is self-authored. Marcus Aurelius would say something similar in his own way. Seneca too, but Epictetus makes it almost surgical. Don't negotiate with what isn't yours. Don't build your emotional life on borrowed territory. But there's something even more shocking. The first discipline is not enough. You can stop demanding outcomes and still become selfish, detached, even morally lazy. Which brings us to the second pillar: the one modern self-improvement often avoids because it's less comfortable, less marketable, and far more demanding. The second discipline is the discipline of action. If desire governs what you chase, action governs how you show up for other people. Because Stoicism was never meant to turn you into a detached monk floating above ordinary life. It was meant to make you useful. Epictetus says, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That line should hit harder than it usually does, because we live in a culture where identity is performed before it is earned. People signal values constantly: discipline, authenticity, healing, growth, stoic calm, but when pressure arrives, the performance collapses. Here's the controversial statement: most people who say they want peace actually want comfort, and comfort has almost nothing to do with character. Peace in the Stoic sense is not soft. It is earned through alignment, through doing what is right when it is costly, inconvenient, and invisible. That means if you are a parent, your philosophy appears in your patience. If you are a partner, it appears in your honesty. If you are a leader, it appears in whether you absorb pressure or spread it. If you are alone, it appears in what you do when no one is watching. And here's where most people get it wrong. They treat morality as mood-dependent. If they feel inspired, they act well. If they feel hurt, they justify pettiness. If they feel tired, they make character optional. Epictetus doesn't let you hide there. To be stoic is not to feel less. It is to let principle outrank impulse. This is where modern stoicism becomes real, not in aesthetic quotes, not in a black and white bust of Marcus Aurelius on your shelf, in traffic, in arguments, in boredom, in temptation. In the 10 seconds between stimulus and response, ask yourself, when stress enters the room, do you become more honorable or just more honest about your lack of training? That question stings because action reveals what thought can conceal. Practical application: start small but not trivial. Pick one role you occupy: friend, parent, employee, creator, spouse, and define what excellence in that role actually looks like. Then do it whether you feel like it or not. Not perfectly, repeatedly. Because repetition is what turns philosophy into temperament. Seneca knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote to remind himself of it constantly. Epictetus built an entire training program around it. This is where it gets interesting. Even right action can still be ruined by a corrupted mind. You can do the correct thing for the wrong reason. You can be disciplined but deluded, moral but vain, calm on the surface and chaotic underneath. So the third discipline goes deeper than behavior. It goes to the hidden source code of your life. The third discipline is the discipline of assent. This is the least discussed and maybe the most important. It governs the split-second moment when an impression appears in your mind and you decide whether to believe it. Someone ignores you. Instantly the mind says, "They don't respect me," you make a mistake. Instantly the mind says, "I'm failing," you feel fear. Instantly the mind says, "Danger is here." Epictetus warns us not to surrender to the first appearance of things. In one of his most important lines, he says, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." That is not motivational fluff. It is cognitive warfare. It means between event and suffering, there is interpretation, and interpretation can be examined. Modern psychology has rediscovered this in different language. Cognitive behavioral therapy, reframing, metacognition, the ancient wisdom was already there in embryo. But Epictetus is still sharper because he adds a moral demand. Do not lie to yourself about what is happening. This matters because your life is shaped less by raw events than by the stories your mind tells at speed. And your mind is not neutral. It is biased toward ego, fear, habit, memory, wounded pride, and catastrophic imagination. In other words, left untrained, your mind is a terrible narrator. So when an impression arrives, Stoicism says, wait. Is this true? Is it fully true? Is it useful? Is it within my control? Imagine how many conflicts would dissolve if people did this for 10 seconds. How many careers would be saved? How many relationships? How much needless shame? You don't need a new personality. You need a gap between impression and assent. And here is the emotional peak of the whole system. The three disciplines are not separate hacks. They are one integrated way of becoming free. Desire trains you not to demand what was never yours. Action trains you to fulfill your role with courage and justice. Assent trains you not to become the victim of your own interpretations. That is the Complete Stoic Training Program, not detachment from life, but proper relationship to it. And now the final line lands with full force. Epictetus says, No man is free who is not master of himself. Think about that for a moment. We talk endlessly about freedom, financial freedom, political freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of lifestyle. All of it matters. But what good is external freedom if your moods control you, if praise owns you, if fear commands you, if every insult can drag your mind around by a leash? Who is more free, the executive with status who cannot sleep without approval, or the ordinary person who governs their own judgments? That question is not theoretical. It is the question underneath your entire life. Because the prison Epictetus escaped was not only Roman slavery, it was inner slavery, the slavery of compulsion, of false belief, of misplaced desire. And if a man in his condition could build that freedom, what excuse do you and I really have? Go back to the image we began with, a man with almost nothing, standing in one of the greatest empires in history, somehow more inwardly free than millions of people with infinitely more options. That is why Epictetus still matters. Not because Stoicism is trendy, not because modern Stoicism looks good in a quote carousel, but because his system exposes the real battlefield, not the battlefield out there, the one in here. So here's the challenge. For the next 7 days, train one discipline each day with intention. When desire flares up, ask, is this in my control? When action is required, ask, what does my role demand? When a thought strikes hard, ask, is this true or just vivid? Write the answers down. Don't trust memory. Memory protects ego. Writing reveals patterns. And by the end of the week, you may discover something unsettling. A huge part of what you called life happening to you was actually untrained reaction happening inside you. That realization can feel brutal. It is also the beginning of liberation. Most people will spend their entire lives avoiding this truth. Will you? Drop your interpretation in the comments. The best answers always come from this community. And if this shifted something in your thinking, subscribe. We go deeper every week. Because in the end, Stoicism is not about becoming colder. It is about becoming ungovernable by what is beneath you. Train your mind, or it will train your suffering.